But I'm going to talk about food policy, because I think that in order to move our food and health and economic agenda forward, we need to have good public policy behind it. And that's why, one reason I'm so glad the mayor is here today, and I'm sure there's other elected officials. Are there other elected officials here? I'm sorry. Oh, we got some, okay. I don't know who you are, but thank you. You're a city alderman. Okay, well so thank you for coming. But we need good policy to support good food. Good laws, good regulations, important funding and appropriations, and to actually spotlight food, coming from our city government, from our county government, from our state governments as well, and of course from our national governments. This is public policy and it's food policy. It's a term that doesn't kind of come trippingly to the tongue, and we're not always sure what food policy means. But just to give you an example at a local level, we're talking about zoning. How can zoning, which has been actually, my favorite elected food official at a local level is in Cleveland, Ohio, and his name is Joe Simperman. If you ever have a chance to talk with him, please do. He's quite something. But he said that if we could imagine that a city is a church, then zoning would be its highest sacrament. And I thought, well, that's pretty powerful. In other words, if we can use zoning to create the kind of food system that we want, one that reduces or eliminates the health inequities that we have and food inequities that we have in communities, ones that strengthen the economic binds that bring us together, then zoning can be a very powerful tool. And we've seen how that can work. So that's one example of policy at a local level. Of course, funding is another one. How do we provide some financial support to move our food system forward? Keep in mind, I don't know the exact numbers here, but in many communities, food is the second or third largest economic sector in any local economy. Yet we take it for granted. We don't give it the kind of financial support that we give other enterprises. So think about what it can do to stimulate your own economy. Often, unfortunately, I think, the biggest sector in too many communities now is the health sector, which kind of speaks to the problems we're having as a nation, dealing with some of our health problems. I'd like to see that reversed. I'd like to put food on top, and I'd like to put health in second or third position over time. And just keep in mind that food gives us a chance to participate as citizens. This was a story that came from Missoula, Montana, where I've done a little work in the past, where they had an ordinance that came before their county commission in Missoula to make some changes in the zoning that would allow for people to raise chickens and bees in their yards, in their backyards. And over 300 people showed up at a hearing on this ordinance to allow for chickens and bees. And one of the county commissioners said, "This was the most people that I've ever seen show up for a public hearing in my entire career." And she'd been on the commission for 10 years. Chickens and bees, food, animals, it brings people out. It engages them in their community, and it makes them really want to care about being a citizen. So keep that in mind. Think about farm to school. Farm to school is a big growing area, a way that we connect farmers to our schools and other public institutions. Today, over 40,000 schools, public schools in the United States, that's about 40% of all public schools, has some kind of farm to school program. In other words, they're buying food from local farmers. Now, I want you to keep the historical framework in mind, because in the late 1990s, we had maybe one or two farm to school programs. Now there's over 40,000. That is huge. It reflects the interest in local food and the local food movement and the power, the energy that that's generating across the nation. Farmers markets. In the 1970s, when I started doing my work in food systems, we had about 300 farmers markets in the United States. Today, according to USDA, we have over 8,000. That really reflects the energy and the interest and the really the thrill that food provides and the enthusiasm that people find in that. Another area of growth in our policy, particularly at the local level, is public procurement. Using our public dollars to buy, relates of course to farm to school, but public procurement has become a really important tool for growing our local food system and making a connection between our public institutions and our communities and our farms. More and more cities, towns, counties are looking at how they can harness those dollars that they already have that they're already using to buy food, whether it's in their schools or their hospitals, their prisons, their senior centers. Look all around, be creative, keep thinking about people. Everyone's buying food, everybody's eating food, right? How can we use our public dollars to support other social and economic goals? We can connect that to our farmers, we can connect it to our citizens, and we can connect it to health. We can get a lot of bang for that public dollar. The public plate, think of it as a public plate, and the money that is available right there to use now to support a series of very important social and economic objectives. Consider the role of planning. Planning is something we sometimes, kind of snooze over. Planning, we have to do that now, right? Well, it's really important. And think about the opportunities that might exist within a comprehensive plan was mentioned, or somebody was talking about the planning. I hope that includes food. I hope it includes a very significant section on food and food systems. If it doesn't, then please think about how you can put it in there. We all need to spend more time being intentional and thoughtful about the future of our food system. Think about this. In the year 2050, there's going to be over 9 billion people on the planet, okay? Most agronomists don't know how we're going to feed all those people. We're facing drought across much of the United States. From my home in New Mexico, we're rationing water all the time. Farmers are increasingly having a difficult time growing food because there's not enough water. California, which is the largest food producer in the country, is facing significant shortages. We have climate problems, we have population growth, we're losing farmland, we're losing our ability to grow food. This looks like a big giant accident that's about to happen. And we can head it off at the curb by being intentional about our food system and actually planning and taking responsibility at the local level where you are. This is not a problem. Your food problem is not a problem for California or for a group of experts in Washington, D.C. It's your problem, and you have to take ownership to make sure that everybody in your community is going to have enough healthy food for the rest of their lives and for the next several generations to come. You have a responsibility now to be thinking about those next 7 generations. So please, one way you can do that is through public policy and through your comprehensive planning. Now, since he's the main attraction, and he's much better looking than I am, that I want you to think about this, is that how food policy councils, and you have a good one here in Chatham County, and I want you to spend more time with it, and I'd like you to actually think about how you can give it the strength and the capacity that it needs to do its job. Just some examples from around the country of how food policy councils have made an impact on food, and I'm going to focus on food hubs in particular because that's kind of the main topic here. In my home state of New Mexico, the New Mexico Food and Agriculture Policy Council, under the leadership of a nonprofit organization called Farm to Table, has taken the lead in putting together a report called The Power of Public Procurement, whereby they found that statewide there's 60 million meals per year that are served in public schools, summer meal programs, senior centers, correctional facilities, and hospitals. And what they've done is they've gone to the state legislature and they've been able to secure over $500,000 of funding annually to support local food by buying food from their farmers and for their schools. They're trying to put at least one additional serving of local food on the plate of every child in New Mexico every school day of the year. Now, I think that's an important objective, and it needs to be supported with public dollars in many cases. But it's joining other dollars that already exist. USDA funding that's reimbursing schools for the purchase of fresh fruits and vegetables, for instance. So, we can find leverage. We can find ways of matching our dollars to support other dollars that are achieving the kinds of objectives we're looking for. Other places have started the process of developing a public procurement and looking at how important aggregation becomes. It's very hard to expand these kinds of public enterprises of supporting local farms with public dollars and running farm-to-school programs if you don't have that infrastructure that you need in order to expand that effort. So in New Mexico, again, they're looking for funding to try to support the development of aggregation facilities, so-called food hubs and other distribution methods. In some states, they've sort of slowed down and they said, well, how much money are we spending now on food, local food or any kind of food? You go to almost any agency, public agency, and they don't have a number for you. They don't know what it is. So in New York State, they passed something called the Food Metrics Bill, whereby they actually are mandating that all state agencies actually have the numbers around how much they're spending already on food and how much of it is being purchased locally. From that, they'll be able to actually create a plan. And so they're going to set objectives as a result of those food metrics that they can then begin to work toward. That's one way to go, fairly low cost, no cost way of starting the discussion about local food. Some places have legislation pending that would require more food education in our schools that is linked to local food. Michigan has a food charter whereby they want every student from K through 12 to have some kind of food education along the way. Food education that will talk about where food comes from, talk about their local food system and local agriculture throughout the state of Michigan. And if you were able to do that and think about what the impact would be on our children, if everyone from K through 12, there was a significant lesson on food. Maybe I could learn how to grow a garden as a result of what I learned in school. Maybe I, as an adult, will be able to prepare healthy meals from unprocessed whole ingredients. Maybe I would have better understanding of how my diet affects my body. God, what a great set of achievements to have our children be able to share and reach through food education. Also, a kind of a simple, relatively low-cost way of achieving very significant health objectives. So we have many examples across the country of how policy is beginning to reshape the choices that people are making in food, reshaping our food system and placing greater emphasis on locally produced food. In San Bernardino, California, they have a food policy council there. It was only established a couple of years ago that is supporting something called the Inland Orange Conservancy, which is a nonprofit food hub, which has 28 growers. It markets 5,000 boxes of produce every week to 24 school districts in Southern California, including Los Angeles. This is reaching 1.5 million children. They also, in addition to that food hub aggregation activities, they also have a 1,200 member community supported agriculture operation, and they also donate 160 tons of surplus produce to an area food bank every year. So they are a significant food force that's being supported by the San Bernardino Food Policy Council. In Douglas County, Kansas, which includes the city of Lawrence, where the University of Kansas is located, the Food Policy Council there, which was established in 2009, has commissioned a food hub feasibility study for 16 counties. In fact, they did the study already. It's been published. It's online if you want to take a look at it. And among several things, it found that that they saw the hub as a way to support intermediate size farms, intermediate to larger farms that had difficulties getting into certain markets, particularly they needed to be they were large enough to be able to meet certain demands, but there still needed to be aggregations. Very small farms were doing fairly well at farmers markets. but they needed to be able to support that next level of farms. They wanted to scale up the local food movement. They wanted to raise the profile of local food through the food hub, and they wanted to strengthen the farm economy. Those were the objectives of their hub. They projected that they could sell about $2.5 million in produce by after 5 years of operation, but they also realized they were going to need some subsidy, that this wasn't going to be a break-even operation or an easy to finance operation right away. So as the Food Policy Council is saying, we as a community want to get behind this and support the development of a hub. I think the simple fact you have a feasibility study, you have something like that underway already in Chatham County, is an important role for a Food Policy Council, an important way to engage the citizens of the community to get behind a very important project, one that is going to take us all to the next level, you might say, of this food movement. You know, we're doing a lot of things at a smaller, lower level right now that are very good, but I think it's time to scale up, to get big, at the same time to be effective. And I think food policy councils and the work that of policy that can happen at a local and county level are very necessary in order to move us in that direction. So, in conclusion, I want to say that I think there's good reasons to have policy, to have public policy that supports food and food systems. As much as I am an advocate of the private sector and our for-profit system, too often we have seen that go in the direction of seeking higher and higher profits, serving interests that are fewer and fewer, making some people relatively wealthy and well off, while leaving behind increasingly large numbers of people. Relying solely on the private sector to try to meet our food needs and to address a host of other issues we have in our communities is not enough. That's why we have to engage the public sector, and that's why public policy is so important. It's also about this funny word we have in this country that we use a lot, and I think about every time that I do a Pledge of Allegiance, and it's democracy. Democracy. That's what I signed up for. I signed up to be a citizen, right? I want to be a citizen, and I want a place at the table, and I want to have some influence over our policies in this country and in my community. So, you know, thank you. When we have ceremonies like this, and they're so important because they recognize the achievement of so many people, we often use the word volunteer. Now, volunteer is a good word, but I think that it tends to kind of overlook the fact that being a citizen is really not like a volunteer thing, you know? I have an obligation to be a citizen. I have an obligation to show up, to speak up. It's not like I have this choice, like the way a volunteer does. I want to be there, I want to make sure that my voice is heard, and I want to make sure that the voices of others who may be too shy or too disempowered or feel like they're just not being heard, sometimes I have to speak up for them too. So I think it's our role, not just as volunteers, but as citizens of this community, to weigh in on policy. Now, business is very important. For-profit operations are completely necessary. In spite of what my mother might say, I am not a Marxist. I am entirely in favor of the incredible role and the thoughtfulness and the skills that the business community has. So what I see in food is a way to marry those good public interest intentions that public policy has to bring forward, along with the capabilities, the efficiencies, the scale, and the just that business acumen that the private sector brings. And there's lastly a need for food policy councils. The food policy councils have to be looking at the big picture. They have to be looking at how all these dots in our food system connect, how health, economy, food insecurity, food access, how does all this come together? How does it relate? Who's winning, who's losing in our food system? And that's the role of a food policy council. It can hold us all accountable around this one thing called a food system. That is a table and a collection of experts and voices of the community that can hold us all accountable for what goes on and can ensure that we actually produce a good food plan and a good food system that's fair and is sustainable and is going to meet the needs of generations to come. They need to know where the policy levers are, they need to engage the community themselves, and they need to understand that big picture. But if you put all these together, all three, Food Policy Council, sharp, aggressive, thoughtful, and caring business community, and good, sound public policy, I think that Chatham County, City of Savannah, is going to be one of the best places in America to not just get a good meal and not just figure out how to use a shrimp net, but to make sure that everybody here has the best, healthiest, most affordable food possible. Good luck, and thank you very much. Thank you. Privilege of introducing Hiley Johnston. He's going to really, I stand up here and crow, but he's actually going to deliver the goods. So Hiley Johnston is a Philadelphia-based social entrepreneur who works to improve the vitality of rural and urban communities through food system reform and policy change. As a father of three, really? Father of three. Hiley actively pursues his core purpose to repair the earth for our children and prepare our children for the earth. Along with his wife, Tatiana, he is the co-director and a founder of Common Market Philadelphia, a really fantastic program, a nonprofit distribution enterprise that connects communities in the Mid-Atlantic region to sustainable locally grown farmland. The two have also teamed up to found the East Park Revitalization Alliance in their community of Strawberry Mansion, where they have resided for 11 years. Hiley is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, where he is concentrated in entrepreneurial management and is proud to have recently served as a food and community fellow with the Institute of Agriculture and Trade Policy. And I will also say that I've had the privilege of getting to know Hiley over the last several months, working on some common projects, and he is a fantastic guy, an incredible leader, and a really smart guy. And I would say he's the future of food system growth in this country. So welcome, Hiley Johnston.
Well, good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Savannah.
Good morning.
Okay, so this is Healthy Savannah. I've read a bunch of studies recently that say sitting is not healthy, right? And I think y'all have been sitting for maybe a little too long, so why don't we all stand up? Yeah. Stretch a little bit, right? I want you to look at your neighbor and smile, because that just feels good. And after hearing Joel this morning recount many of the achievements that you've made over the last year, which have been nothing short of remarkable, I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. So you're welcome to remain standing or sit if you like. It's up to you. I want to first and foremost thank Cynthia Hayes from Saffron for bringing me here to Savannah and introducing me to some of the local farmers, some of the growers, some of the real heroes in this region who are on the front edge of food system reform. So thank you, Cynthia. And also to Mr. Hayes, who has graciously driven us around the countryside, enabling a lot of this activity. So hats off to you, sir, as well. While we were spending time planning my coming to Savannah, one of the first questions I asked was, what is happening locally here? What do the efforts look like to plan for food systems reform? And lo and behold, we heard that Ms. Whitney was doing research on what it would mean to bring a food hub to Savannah. And I said, well, you're bringing me in from far away to talk about the work I do. We need to give her an opportunity to share as well. So thank you, Whitney, for sharing. And planning from my perspective is really the first step that any region needs to take before embarking on this kind of change. So I think you're on your way, and thank you very much. I also would like to thank Mark, because Mark Winne, who spoke before me, has been an absolute inspiration to me in my work. And I was perplexed that I'd be given the opportunity to speak last, because his career is far more outstanding than mine. Mine is burgeoning. But I think what I have the opportunity to do for each and every one of you is share some of the practical applications of how our community in Philadelphia has come together to address some of the challenges that we face by creating food system reform and connecting people to better food. So I was really encouraged by both the words shared by Whitney earlier and by the words of Mark, and I hope to reinforce some of their points by sharing the story of Common Market in Philadelphia and the work that we've done there. I also, before I start, I'm going to tell you a little story as well. While you see these pictures in the background of our organization and our partners and our work, I do also want to thank the good mayor. I walked in here this morning and I sat in the mayor's chair, and she was so gracious with me. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the city of Savannah for hosting me. I especially want to thank you for your weather. Okay. I come from Philadelphia, which is known as the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, and I think we got that name because of our weather. Because of how cold it's been over the last few months, we got to have something to do in the wintertime. So I got off the plane in Jacksonville a couple days ago and thought I'd fallen asleep on the plane, woke up, I was a little disoriented. I got off the plane, I thought I was in Jamaica. It was so warm. It felt so good to me. I don't know if you've heard about the polar vortex, but polar vortex has put a whooping on us this year. So let me get back to Common Market, though, right? So about 12 years ago, my wife and I moved to our community of Strawberry Mansion in Philadelphia. And I want to paint a little picture for you of Strawberry Mansion so you understand where I'm coming from and really what the inspiration for the Common Market is and was and how we came to be. So Strawberry Mansion in the city of Philadelphia is a beautiful neighborhood. We sit adjacent to one of the largest inner city parks in the world. So when I walk out of my door, I literally walk into 1,200 acres of parkland. Beautiful historic architecture that predates some of the architecture here. And just a gorgeous community. But with some of the greatest health disparities and diet-related disease challenges of any community in the nation. Common Market is, I keep calling my neighborhood Common Market. I spend so much time there, I feel like it's home. Strawberry Mansion has one of the highest percentages of African Americans of any community in the city of Philadelphia. We have 98% of our elementary school catchment is African American. We also happen to be one of the lowest income communities in the city of Philadelphia. And the mayor's nodding her head because I know she knows Councilwoman Marion Tasco in Philadelphia and other leaders of Philadelphia and understands firsthand some of our challenges. And we also have some of the highest incidents of violent crime in the city, and often the highest murder rate. My wife and I chose to live in Strawberry Mansion because all of the beauty and all of the history of Strawberry Mansion, all of the opportunity that we see, and because of access to the park. And we wanted to live in a place where, one, we could afford to live and where we could, and at the time we didn't have children, but in a neighborhood where we wanted to raise our children and create a better future for not just our own children, but for other children in our community. So what we did when we first moved there is we started, meeting our neighbors and learning about some of the challenges and learning about some of the opportunities that we could create to really improve our own quality of life. And really for us, it was about how do we make Strawberry Mansion a place where people who live there want to stay, make it a neighborhood where also other people might want to come and live as well. There was a lot of vacant land that's been dumped upon, where a lot of illegal activity happened. And the first thing we said is, well, maybe there's a way we can work with youth in our community to clean up these vacant lots and to do something productive in this space. So we got to gardening and planting things, and I'm not trained in agriculture at all, but what we found is if you put some seeds in the ground and you engage kids, and periodically you remember to water it, something's going to grow, right? And so we, all of a sudden flowers sprouting up and vegetables and people coming out of their houses and trying to see what's going on there. And we launched, as Mark mentioned, we launched this organization, East Park Revitalization Alliance, with our community, and really oriented toward improving the quality of life and building healthy community in Strawberry Mansion, engaging youth around growing food, cooking food, physical activity, built environment challenges, and using food as a metaphor for healthy decision making. And so, Tatiana and I have been running East Park Revitalization Alliance. I got Common Market on the brain for about 5 years, and having great success, engaging hundreds of kids in our neighborhood in positive activity, engaging their parents also in healthy food access. And we had to start asking ourselves some really hard questions. While we absolutely believed that the work that we were doing was critically important to our community, how long would it take for that work to begin to impact health outcomes in our community? How long would that work actually impact, how long would it take to impact health disparity? How long would it take for us to change the culture of consumption in our community? And how could we as a community take greater ownership in how food comes to our community, take greater sovereignty over how we access food? So again, it was some soul searching for us. We were really thinking about how could we as a community have greater impact on our own health, and how could we expedite the rate of change? And we really started thinking about the fact that most of the health disparity that exists in our community had everything to do with food access, the food that was being brought into our community, and we largely had no power and no decision-making capacity over what kind of food came, the kinds of establishments it was sold out of, and how we got our food in the institutions that serve our community. So there's a bit of sometimes I feel like it's like a biblical element to this story as well. So around that time, we began, we were soul searching, we were looking for answers, we were looking for ways to be more impactful, we were looking for inspiration and change. And Tatiana had a friend from Germany. So this man came from across the seas. And, he wanted to come and study the Amish and Mennonite farmers in our region. And he was perplexed by how they were using such simple technology and having such tremendous yields in their farmland, using very, very simple, generations, if not eons old farming techniques, and having tremendous production in our community, in our region. Now, mind you, Philadelphia is, I would say, very similar to here in that you don't have to travel very far before you start to hit the dirt, as we say, before you find the farmland and you can see active agriculture. But for some reason, that food that is being grown only about an hour away from our community was not finding its way to our neighborhood. Now, mind you, we're talking about 45 minutes in one direction, an hour and a half in another direction. Maybe 2 hours in another direction, but tremendous amounts of food being grown in our region, but somehow not connecting to the communities that were suffering from a lack of access to food. And our food system, the people and often the for-profit entities that control how we access food had somehow decided that Strawberry Mansion and other communities like Strawberry Mansion were no longer worth serving. At the same time, they had decided that small family farms in our region were also no longer worth serving, and that there was not value in connecting the needs of these two communities. So this gentleman, Martin, from Germany, comes and he brings us out to the farmland, and in our region we have farm auctions, and the farm auctions were set up to help farmers transition away from tobacco and into growing produce that could be, and as a mechanism for them to get this food to market. So we go to the auction one day with Martin, and our minds were blown. All this amazing food all around us, only an hour and a half from our house. And we got caught up in the energy, right? If any of you have been to the auction, auctioneer starts talking fast, he's moving and the energy starts flowing, and I said, I got to get me a paddle, and I got to try this out. And so I got a paddle, I started bidding on things, and it was the fall and they were selling apples. And lo and behold, I was the top bidder, right? I was exuberant because I had never seen so much good food in one place. And when it was all said and done, I wasn't sure what I had bought, but I knew I got something. And I walked over. The man showed me the cart of apples I had bought, and I bought I think it was about 12 bushels of apples. And I didn't know what I had paid for them, but I had won, which was the important part. And I said, well, how much did all this cost? He said, 12 bushels of apples. It was about, I'm going to round it up, but it was about $4.50 a bushel that I had paid for these apples, which was ridiculous because if you know anything about farming, a box costs about $1.50, and the farmer's labor probably cost at least that, and his time coming to auction, or her time coming to auction probably cost at least that. So for the farmer, this was a break-even, if at best, break-even affair. But for us, it was enlightening and eye-opening in a lot of ways. We said on one side, this is crazy because farmers are not being paid a fair wage for the food that they're growing. The most amazing, delicious, healthful, sustainably grown apple that I had ever tasted. And now on the other side, we were buying cases of apples wholesale to feed to the kids in our programs. We were spending $25 an hour and a half away in Philadelphia buying the same apples, maybe, not knowing where they were coming from, but spending $25 for a case. And I said, this is madness. Farmers aren't getting paid what they deserve here on one side. Communities aren't getting the product that they should, and when they are, it's overpriced, or it's low quality, or it's been processed, all the nutrients have been processed out of it. Is there a possibility that we could create an organization that connects the interests of these two communities in a fair and transparent way? And that really was the epiphany moment for us in the launch of Common Market. Was there an opportunity to bypass all of the stewards that had control over the fate of the farms on one side and the fate of communities on the other in a way that could be mutually beneficial, in a way that really focused benefit on what I call the two anchors of the value chain, producers on one side and consumers on the other. Now, here's where policy comes in, which I think is critically important to this story today and to the role that each of you play in advancing a healthy future for the city of Savannah. Around that time, there was a bond issue called First Industries program in Pennsylvania. And this was a bond issue that created planning grants for food projects and for tourism, which in the city of Savannah, I hear are two big industries. So again, not dissimilar to Pennsylvania, but these were our two original industries on some level and also our two largest industries in the state of Pennsylvania. And this created an opportunity for us to apply for a planning grant, which enabled us to dig deeper and to engage communities in a more meaningful way in planning our collective future together, in planning a reformed food system on some level, or at least a food system intervention that could connect communities, again, in a fair and transparent way. And through that process of engaging farmers and understanding their needs, and engaging communities in different market segments and understanding their needs, the plan for Common Market was born. Just want to see which pictures y'all are seeing. I was fairly deliberate in choosing these photos I want to share because, oh, that's my homie, the goat. One, to demonstrate a degree of scale that is necessary to efficiently connect farmers and communities. And by efficiently, I mean operating at an appropriate scale so that food can be accessible and affordable within communities, and at the same time, still having the ability to return more of that food dollar to the family farmer in your region. So Common Market, when we began planning, or as a result of our planning, and actually I will say as a result of running a very small community-based nonprofit for about 5 years, we said we had to figure out an intervention that could be self-sustaining on some level in time. We didn't want to be in a position where we had to go to the grant maker every year and rely on the goodwill of the grant community to support our initiative. We wanted to find a way that we could actually engage in enterprise and create economic opportunity for the communities that we were serving in a self-sustaining way. And again, as Mark mentioned, as Whitney mentioned, as we've heard, I think over and over again, that there needs to be an opportunity to potentially subsidize this kind of activity and to get this activity off of the ground, but finding the ways that we can reach appropriate scale in order to create self-sustaining community interventions. So for us, having had this, again, community-based nonprofit experience, also having a degree of formal business training. My wife also actually went to, she got her MBA from the Wharton School, so she was saying that we need to find a way for this to work on its own. We started thinking about what it would mean to scale and how we could do that. And what we figured was that it couldn't just be directly engaging our own community. And that this problem, this challenge, was so much larger than our community alone. This was a challenge that so many communities faced. And that we needed to effectively engage the interests of diverse communities around our region in order to come up with this appropriately scaled intervention. So for us, it wasn't just the needs of this lowest income community, this brown community that's struggling from health disparities, but it was also the needs of the middle income communities when you look at their health outcomes weren't altogether different. It was also the needs of some of our more affluent communities that have been excited about local food, and some of the parents who have been pushing their institutions to source local food, and those institutions saying, hey, we'd love to, but nobody sells this stuff, or we can't get it affordably, or we don't know where to go to get it safely, which is critically important. So our strategy for launching Common Market at appropriate scale was first to engage the institutions of our region. And so I'd like to ask a question is, how many folks in this audience represent a school, a hospital, a university, elder care facility, a market? Can you raise your hand tall? Okay, so a good number of them. So for us, appropriate scale was looking at what the procurement possibilities existed within institutional food service in our region, and how could we capture even a small percentage of institutional food service procurement, both as a means for selling meaningful volumes of food so that we're engaging farmers in appropriate ways, and also providing meaningful volumes of food, and not just any food, but sustainably grown food, locally sourced food, food that was grown by small and medium-sized family farmers in our region, getting that kind of higher quality food to the people who needed it the most in our region. So again, trying to use the procurement dollar of institutional food service as a mechanism of both creating this self-sustaining intervention and at the same time impacting the communities, again, these two anchors of the value chain in the most meaningful way. So I've told you a little bit of the why and a little bit of the how. So I'll share just briefly a little bit of the what. And then I'm going to be excited to invite our co-presenters back up, and hopefully we can answer some direct questions. So what we do is this. And it's funny because I'm going to say, people sometimes talk about Common Market as an innovation. I say, we're not an innovation. We're just going back to the way things used to be, right? We're just returning back to the simple mechanism of connecting communities with food, right? It's like one of the most basic things you can imagine. But what we do is this, and again, these pictures are instructive because infrastructure is a big part of it. And Winne talked about infrastructure and the need for infrastructure to play this role in connecting communities. It is not safe nor is it efficient for farmers to be driving their food directly to the institution's dock in their pickup trucks. It is not efficient for the institution to be doing direct procurement from 100 or 50 different farmers. And what you need is this distribution infrastructure in the middle, and middle people get a bad name sometimes, but when the middle people are fair and transparent, they provide an incredibly valuable service. So what we do is we work with about 80 family farms in the Philadelphia region. We use a similar definition to the Forsyth Farmers Market, where we talk about most of our food coming from within 200 miles. So 80 family farms from within 200 miles, and we aggregate their food. Now, we sell everything from all the produce that you can imagine that's grown in our region to protein. So we do a lot of turkey and ground beef and chicken. We do a lot of dairy products, and that's why my friend the goat is in the picture. We sell a lot of goat cheese and a lot of yogurt. And so we aggregate this food at our warehouse in Philadelphia. And we work with our institutional food service partners to really, I'm going to say, share what the farmers have available and promote their food and maintain the transparency of who grew the food, where it was grown, its production values, so whether it was organic, chemical-free, integrated pest management, and other progressive sustainable growing practices, so that when the institutional food service buyer is looking at our list, they know exactly where the food is coming from and they can convey that directly to the students or hospital patients or other folks they're serving. So then these institutions, they order the food from us, we communicate it back to the farmer, it is literally picked to order, and then we, again, aggregate and distribute. So we play this connecting role, this promotional role, between the farmer on one side and the institutional food service vendor on the other. One of the things that I think is really exciting about I'm going to say the exuberance around food hubs nationally is that number one, they take all kinds of different shapes and sizes. Not all food hubs need to look like Common Market nor replicate the work that Common Market is doing, but there is the appropriate model that folks can pursue for their region. And it is through planning, it is through engagement of communities that you find what that intervention looks like for the city of Savannah. It's through the process of developing advocacy organizations like Healthy Savannah and food policy councils that you begin to identify the needs of communities and connect them to this vision so that they are invested in this idea and they have real ownership over the outcomes. And it's by working with organizations like Savannah, who is doing farmer organization, farmer capacity building, and helping farmers build their ability to meet the needs of the market, that you begin to create these bridges. So I say all this to say, and I'm again excited to share our story in hopes that we can, I think the sign says in the middle, one of the 3 points is inspire. I'm hoping to inspire the city of Savannah through our story. And mind you, Common Market is only 6.5 years old. And in the last 6.5 years, we have grown to, this year we'll move about $3 million of local food to about 250 regional institutions. 80 of those institutions are schools, about 15 of them are hospitals, and we're connecting the communities and the people who need food the most in our region to the highest quality food that you can imagine. Mark brought up an incredibly important point, and I think I meant to mention this earlier. When we started Common Market, you could only find local food in farmers markets, in white tablecloth restaurants, and in CSAs. And a big part of our objective was to democratize access to good food, because all people of all communities deserve to be able to access good, sustainable local food. So with that, I really want to again thank you all for inviting me today to share our story. It's but one story of food system success and reform, and I think it is absolutely possible for the city of Savannah to create its own story moving forward, and it begins with the plan. So again, thank you.